Shalom, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. So we're going to talk about Netilat Yadayim, and I want to add a little bit to what Rabbi Aaron said. I mean, Rabbi Aaron shared some great stuff, and I wanted to go along those themes, and hopefully we'll be able to take it also a little bit from a little bit of a different angle. And I think that when we begin to talk about Netilat Yadayim, we do have to begin to understand this concept of Tumah and Tahara, right? Which again is usually translated as impurity or purity, but these words have like negative connotations. So I think though, if you look at the Jewish sources, certainly if you look at the Maharal, who I'm particularly focused on here, the Maharal seems to translate the concept of Tumah as an energy that takes hold when there is a loss of potential. An energy that takes hold when there is a loss of potential. So I think the best example of this, right, in Judaism we have the best example of this is someone who passed away, is a dead body. And the thing is though, the Maharal explains that this energy that takes hold when there is a loss of potential affects first and foremost the hands. Matter of fact, he says that it enters the body by way of the hands. Why is this, right? Because the hands here in this world of action, here in this world of doing, and in Kabbalah, this world is referred to as Olam Asiyah, right? Which literally means a world of action, a world of doing. And so that means first and foremost, if we have a loss of potential in this world, it means a loss of potential to do. It means a lost opportunity to act, to make a difference, to do something positive, right? And so therefore, the most susceptible part of the body towards Tuma'ah in this world, towards this energy of loss of potential in this world, is going to be the hands. And so therefore, this energy of Tuma'ah enters by way of the hands. Now, when we wake up in the morning, when a person is asleep, like we mentioned, when a person's asleep, so yeah, the soul leaves the body to a certain extent, right? But even when the soul comes back, the energy of loss of potential doesn't leave that body completely, doesn't leave that person completely. It still stays on the hands. And this is what Netilat Yadayim is all about. Now, the truth is, we also have this in our lives all the time, if you think about it, right? You've probably, either you've said yourself has said it, or you know someone who has. This person wakes up in the morning and say, yeah, I wake up in the morning at 7 o'clock, but I'm not really awake until I had my cup of coffee, right? It means to say that the energy of sleep, even in our own lives, in many ways, the energy of sleep is still with us throughout our day, right? If we don't go ahead and do something, right, to change that. And so this is the idea, typically of coffee, right? But Judaism wants to say, look, that's a physical parallel of what's going on spiritually. And it's good to know that in general in Kabbalah, you find one of the reasons actually that Kabbalah is referred to as Kabbalah. We know simple understanding is Kabbalah is from the Hebrew word lekabel, which means to receive, because we're receiving the deeper teachings about the world, about Judaism, about being received by the student from the teacher. But another idea is that Kabbalah is also related to the Hebrew word makbil, which means parallel. Because in Kabbalah we understand that one of the biggest principles in Kabbalah is that everything here in this physical world is a parallel to a deeper spiritual reality, right? So I think we could say probably that Netilat Yadayim is kind of like our spiritual coffee, right? That a person goes to sleep, the soul leaves to a certain extent, which means that what greater loss of potential is there than if a soul leaves the body? Right? So obviously we have this with the dead body, but with ourselves as well, when a person is sleeping, there's a certain loss of potential there. So when a person is awake, so yeah, okay, the soul comes back, but there still is that energy of a loss of potential that the person has and that the body has. And so therefore what we're involved with, what we go ahead and do is Netilat Yadayim. Netilat Yadayim. And the way this works is that we take water and we put it into a vessel, right? And if you think about it, how did this energy of loss of potential come to the body? When the soul left the body, there was a separation of what we refer to in Kabbalah as light and vessel, right? And let's talk about that for a second. In Kabbalah, light and vessel is a well-known paradigm. which means to say that for anything to really exist and act in this world, there needs to be a coming together of a light and vessel, right? And we see this when we look, if you see a ray of light coming through your window, you're not actually seeing the light. You're seeing the light being reflected off of dust particles, right? And so similarly, in order for anything, for us to go ahead and manifest ourselves in this world, there needs to be a coming together of soul and body. When there's a detachment of soul and body, when there's a detachment of a light and vessel, so what comes out from that is that there is this energy, there's a loss of potential, there's a loss of the ability to act. And so what Netilat Yadayim is all about is about taking this concept of a light, which is characterized by the water. Why? Because the water, just like light, is something that brings forth life. Water also is something that brings forth life. And furthermore, it's also about the concept of awareness and wisdom. All right. Matter of fact, it says in the Tanakh, in the Jewish in the prophets, that in the times of Mashiach, you're going to find that the world will be covered with the consciousness of God, the way the sea is covered with water, right? And what does that mean to say? It means to say that when that water is an example, the concept of consciousness. It's the concept of awareness. It's the concept of being present. It's the concept of life, right? Which is also what the concept of light is all about, right? And so the idea here is that when we want to bring together these two, what caused the energy of a loss of potential was the separation of light and vessel, the separation of soul and body. And so this energy of loss of potential, which rests on the hands, what we do in order to rectify that situation is bringing together light and vessel, bringing together water and vessel. And specifically in a vessel, because that's the whole issue at hand. The whole issue at hand is separation of the two. So we bring them together and then we pour them on the hands, right? And it's an interesting thing. I think that we can say also that, you know, the blessing that we say on the washing of the hands, of course, is al Netilat Yadayim. And it means, like was previously mentioned, it means the taking of the hands. But if you think about it, there's another word in Hebrew for take, which is lakach or lokeach, to take. So why not use that word, right? So we know something, you know, Jewishly, anyone who studies these things knows that if there's two words in the Hebrew language for the same thing, really, you don't have the exact meaning. There's got to be nuance there, or else it would just be one word. And so I think, and I didn't see this anywhere, this is my own idea, but I think perhaps if we were to say the word lokeach, to take, it means taking something, I think it could mean taking something into my domain. Before it didn't have my name on it, I saw it in the street, and then I picked it up, I took it and I brought it into my domain, now it has my status on it. But perhaps maybe what notel means is I take something and then I take on the status of that thing, right? So al Netilat Yadayim perhaps could mean I'm taking, really what am I doing? I'm taking the water and I'm pouring it on my hands when I'm saying that. But maybe maybe what the idea is that my hands are taking on the status of this water vessel combination, this light vessel combination. I'm coming back to a state of tahara, which means, if tuma means an energy that takes hold when there is a loss of potential, so then tahara means that I'm in a state of potential. I'm ready to go ahead and elevate. I'm ready to go ahead and activate. I'm ready to go ahead and ascend to the level of what's called kedusha, of holiness, right? And so this is, I think, in a nutshell, this is certainly the way the Maharal speaks about Netilat Yadayim. And I think this is an important message also for us, particularly when it comes to Hanukkah. Because, you know, Hanukkah, the emphasis of the Greeks was the idea of detaching from the spiritual, of, you know, if the Jewish goal is to find the spiritual, right? The Jewish goal is to find the spiritual even in the physical. The Greek goal seems to be that find a way to explain away any kind of spirituality, right? Matter of fact, you see this when the great Hasidic masters, the Bnei Yisachar, said that you can see both of these things in the Hebrew words, right? The Jew, Yehudi, is from the word Yehud, the name Yehuda. Yehuda, if you look at it, is the letters Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey with a Dalet, right? The name of Hashem with the letter Dalet. What's Dalet? Dalet in Judaism, Bnei Yisachar says, and the Maharal as well, that Dalet is the concept of the one who doesn't have. Dalet is also spells out a word in Hebrew, Dalet Lamed Taf. Dalet is from the word Dal, which means a poor person, meaning the one who doesn't have, right? Matter of fact, also that spells the word Delet, which means a door, because a poor person needs to go from door to door. And so therefore, it doesn't just mean in terms of money, it can mean in terms of consciousness, it can be in terms of awareness, it can be in terms of knowledge. So a Jew, what is the Jew? The Jew is Yud, to bring the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey to the Dalet, to the one that doesn't have, to the space that doesn't have, to the four corners of the globe, to the nations of the world, right? To be a light unto the nations, right? So this is what the Jew is all about, is about attaching spirituality and physicality. But what the Greeks were all about was about doing their best to do away with any kind of semblance of spirituality. Matter of fact, that's the idea that if you look at the word for Greek in Hebrew, Yavan, you find that if you can picture the letters, you'd notice something. Yud, Vav, Nun, right? It's all going downward. It's not just a matter of attaching itself, but becoming totally engrossed, like that Nun Sofit, that En Nun becomes engrossed, goes all the way down and beneath, right? Because the idea is Yud is Yud is the most, there's an idea, people like to say Yud is the most spiritual of all the letters. A lot of people say that, but they don't explain why that is. If you look at the letter Yud, besides that, it's the only one that's kind of floating and, like esoteric in that manner. But if you look at the letter Yud, says the Maharal, you take that Yud, what is that Yud? He says that Yud is like a dot. It's a point, right? Essentially, it's like, if you take a quill and dip it in the ink and then put it on the parchment, as soon as it hits the parchment, bam, you have a dot. That's already technically you have a Yud. You don't have to draw it out into something that is physical, right? Already you have that letter Yud. Also, it's interesting, the letter Yud in Hebrew also is made up of 3 letters if you spell it out. Yud, Vav, Dalet spells the letter Yud, right? Which is also the same letters as the word Dio in Hebrew, which literally means ink. What it means to say is that the letter Yud in Hebrew is that concept of spirituality, just like a dot is on the paper. So it shows that it exists. It's on the paper. So it shows that it exists, but it hasn't been drawn out into physical space. It hasn't been physified. So Yud is the concept of spirituality. But when the Greek goes ahead in the word Yavan, you see that what's it doing? It's not only drawing it out and bringing it down in a way that's healthy, in a way that's in a way of integration, but it's bringing it down in a way that becomes totally engrossed in the physical, that you lose sight of the fact that there's spirituality there. And this is what the Greeks, the Hellenists, were all about. And so I think how appropriate it is that we are being metakein, we're fixing and elevating this issue with the power of Netilat Yadayim and bringing it to a healthy place, that taking spirituality and not just leaving it up in the clouds somewhere, right? That's not what spirituality is all about, right? Spirituality, as far as the Jews are concerned, means going ahead and living it in a very practical way. And so I think this is the concept a little bit of Netilat Yadayim, I believe, and the relevance and connection that we can see in Hanukkah. And there's an idea that for every time period throughout the year, to find those things that are relevant for that time period, that the energy is open for that to be fruitful and for that to be fruitful and to be worthwhile, right? What I mean by that is, for example, we know that Pesach is a holiday of freedom, and we know that Yom Kippur is a time of teshuvah, of returning to God and forgiveness, right? Really, a person can do teshuvah any time of the year, right? And there's even teachings that say we should be doing teshuvah every day. But in particular, the idea is that the gates are particularly open for that during the time of Tishrei, right? And same thing with Pesach, the holiday of freedom, and like we mentioned, right? Like, I mean, it's a good idea probably to quit smoking any day of the year or any month of the year. But in particular, the energy is, so to speak, in the air and conducive for freedom and detachment from that which was holding me down, particularly during the time of Nisan and during the time of Pesach. And so the question, I think, is, okay, so what are some of those things that we can do during this time of Chanukah? And I think Netilat Yadayim is really a great idea, because it's talking about integrating spirituality into our physical lives, especially, like we mentioned, hands, which are the most, physical, is the concept of physical involvement, which is what this physical world first and foremost is, right? To be able to be focusing on that concept of attaching spirituality to that, and not losing sight of the spiritual opportunities within that, I think is a very apropos and a great use of our time and our focus on this holiday. So I hope this is meaningful. I hope this helps. I hope it gives us something to think about and be conscious of. And I thank you for having me.